Thank you, Katie. As many of you know, I'm Scott Hardin-Neary with the Creation Care Alliance of Western North Carolina, and we've been engaging and encouraging congregations for several years, way before I was a part of this group, to care for creation and to love their neighbors in ever redeeming and healthy ways. And this is a manifestation of that. This workshop that we're doing, and we've done this several times in person. So this is our first Zoom manifestation of this workshop. It's designed to be similar to a train the trainers kind of experience, because we know that most of you are not all from the same congregation. But we recognize that this is designed to support like a green team or a session or board to begin to look at what are the next steps for creation care, because so oftentimes it can be overwhelming. There's so many opportunities to engage in not only social justice, but creation care. And I'll tell a story about that in a minute. But our time today, and you're welcome to eat during this. We recognize it's during the lunch hour. And so if you're a really messy eater, you might want to turn off your video for a Slurpee, like a drool of spaghetti sauce or whatever. But generally, we're happy to have you here and grateful for you to spend some time with us. We're going to do a little practice around creation care and do a brief check-in. I'm just kind of giving you a sense of the afternoon, the day, and then I'm going to speak a little bit about kind of our experience of how this process came to be, and then we'll do a listening to your community practice. And then share in breakout rooms, which Katie will explain that to us if you haven't done a breakout room, but it's essentially like small groups for Zoom. And then we'll look at what we have 19 different categories within our creation care toolkit. And we'll kind of break that down a little bit and begin to think about our own lives, how we might engage in creation care, and then the life of our community. And it could be your neighborhood, it could be your whatever organization you're a part of, or your church or synagogue or faith community. And then we'll look at the tool itself and then end our time together. I will say that I recognize that we've been doing this work for quite some time and have enjoyed and been grateful for the recognition that the spiritual life at its best, it integrates social justice and ecological justice. That the way that we care about our neighbors impact the way that we care about our forests, the way that we care for our rivers and our oceans impact the way that we care for our neighbors, particularly for our neighbors who are impoverished or facing hunger, insecurity, particularly for communities of color. And we recognize that we're in a time now where physical health is at the forefront of our minds. Where faith communities are threatened in new ways, just because the way that, in my faith community that I'm a member of, we can't touch each other. We can't do a passing of the peace. We don't share communion in the ways that we used to. We don't sing together. There are many things that are missing. And so there are a lot of shifts happening. At the same time, there is a growing awareness of the inequity and injustice and this powerful good movement towards wholeness around racial inequality and inequity. And we recognize that this is the landscape that we're living in right now, and it's not foreign to us. We are primarily Caucasian white organization with our leadership and with our participant churches, and we are doing work around how to engage and learn and accompany and mostly listen to communities of faith and communities of color. And so as we engage in these 19 different ways of engaging in creation care, we recognize that racial equity has a part to play, a very big part to play. And that as we address climate change issues, that we are engaging with race issues. And when we engage and invite our communities to become anti-racists, that they will then care for the body of creation in a new way as well, that these things are intersectional. So I wanted to share a little bit about that. There's not a lot of words around pandemic There are a few around race and about caring for our neighbor in this tool that we're giving you. But I'm just naming it that the time, the Kairos moment of this is we have unique opportunities today that we didn't have maybe a year ago when we were creating this document. So I wanted to invite us into this time as a way of prayer. That word discernment, discerning next steps, is not deciding next steps. It's not having a vote. Next step is discernment, and so it's a prayer practice, really. And so as we're doing this, I'm going to invite us to be in it with a spirit of attentiveness to our own communities, to our own bodies, to our own spirits, as well as our brains. And so as we engage all these pieces. This prayer was sent to me by some of my spiritual mentors, and I cannot pronounce the last name of it. So I'm just going to say it quickly so it sounds very official. Macrina Werdeker, maybe some of you know of Macrina. Listen to these words. Make of us a perennial presence, a beautiful blessing, a sacramental sign of your love in the world. I'll read it again. Make of us a perennial presence, a beautiful blessing, a sacramental sign of your love for the world. May it be so. So as a way of connecting with one another, I'm a fan of the check-in. And so I'm going to invite Katie to break us out into groups of 2 or 3 and invite us to just simply share how you're doing. Maybe your name, gratefully your names are in your box there, your rectangle. But maybe from where you coming from, either faith community or neighborhood or town, and then answer these 2 questions briefly. You will have about a minute each. What is challenging you right now? And what is bringing you joy or surprise right now? So what is challenging you now? And what is bringing you joy or surprise? And Katie's just going to randomly assign us to a pair or triad, depending on the number of people that are joining us. And then we'll just spend about 3 minutes just touching in with other humans. And then we'll go back to 2-dimensional world. I mean, it's 2-dimensional either way, but at least it'll be good. All right, Katie, we're ready.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and enable the breakout room. So you'll get a little window that pops up that tells you you've been assigned to a breakout room. And you can hit join, or it will send you if you wait too long. And then when I close them, you'll get a 60-second warning that the breakout rooms are closed. And you can either select to leave the breakout room at that time, or if you wait the full 60 seconds, it will send you back to the big room automatically. So you shouldn't really have to do anything in order to make it happen, but just so you know.
And then one other piece is, if you, like Mary and Dennis, if there's an opportunity for you to be videoed on, if you're going to do it at any time during this hour or so, during these small group times might be the time to turn on your video if you're, not in your PJs or whatever, whatever this is more comfortable for you. It's not a mandatory thing, but just there'll be, there's space for each. Great, thanks.
And there is an option in the breakout room to ask for help. So if you run into an issue, you can hit that button and then I'll come join your breakout room and see what's up. All right, breakout rooms beginning now. Hi, Susan. You're muted right now, so we can't hear you, but
I'm 20 minutes late, sorry.
No worries. We've just headed into breakout rooms to answer the questions, what's challenging you right now and what's surprising you right now about this moment, just as a quick check-in. So if you feel good about it, I'll go ahead and move you into a breakout room to talk to the other folks there.
That sounds great. How many have we got?
People on the call?
Yeah.
We have, I would say 12.
That's okay, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, I think we've got 12. Scott. Hello.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, that was odd. It wouldn't let me admit you from the breakout room. I had to leave the breakout room I was in.
Oh,
But I was talking to the person who was supposed to be in your breakout room because they were by themselves. So I didn't want to interrupt her to leave immediately.
yeah, that's good. That's what I figured. Thank you for, did you get a chance to share?
Yeah.
Oh, good. Good,
Yeah, I
good.
think
Hi,
probably
Susan.
folks I told them one more minute, probably a minute ago. So I might go ahead and close them.
Sounds good. Welcome, Susan.
Thanks, Scott. Sorry to be late.
No problem. We just did a quick check-in, and now we're moving into a little prayer practice. Welcome back. So throughout this time, welcome back. Throughout this webinar / conversation, I will be stepping in and out of a couple of different roles. One is just to provide the workshop, and the other is to kind of point towards aspect of the workshop. So if you decide to lead it for your town or for your denomination or for your congregation, you'll kind of know a little bit of the behind the scenes. We're offering, I mean, obviously this is available, what you're having now, the recording will be available, but then we'll be sharing the slides and then all the accompanying paperwork and things like that in case you want to do this in your home congregation. So I'm going to step into let's observe what's happening. This is designed, obviously what you're doing to build rapport and connection. We're going to offer a quick prayer practice, which is one that I've used in a variety of settings to help people connect to creation. And people oftentimes will have a growing sense of care for the earth after this practice. So I should have told you that after the practice, but we'll just do it that way. So I invite you to get comfortable as you are, and to remember, if you're able, a time when you were in nature or the out of doors, when you sensed the presence of God, or when you noticed freedom or a sense of awe or terror for some of us in nature. So for some of us, it may be that we have many of those memories, but I invite you to try to remember one moment of awe or wonder, or what some would call a God moment in nature. And just silently try to fill out that scene, that experience. Try to remember, as you're in nature, a time when you experienced this wonder. I'm just catching you up, Candace, in case you didn't hear the prompt. We're doing a little prayer practice. Can you remember the sense? What did you smell during this time? Remember, if you will, the colors, and a train is here to help us with our practice. Remember if other people were with you or if you were by yourself. What were the sounds of the memory that you have? Can you remember what you were hearing? if you can, remember some of your feelings of that time, that moment of wonder or awe, that God moment in nature. Did you have any prevailing thoughts during that time? I invite you to hold on to that memory for just a moment as you enter into another breakout room, and we're going to listen to one another's stories. So I invite you to, again, this will be brief, but about a minute and a half, 2 minutes. So Katie, I guess it'd be like 6 minutes or 8 minutes or something like that in the small group, probably 6, to share a little bit. And if you didn't have a memory, sometimes if you listen to the others in your group, something will be, you'll be reminded of sometime. And just share a little bit about your experience, and the rest of you in the group just simply listen as a way of prayer and recognition, honoring, and then switch to the next person. And we'll be more in groups of three or four for this. Katie's going to send us out. Just share a little bit about your memory of wonder or awe or God moment in nature. Welcome back to the big room. I wonder if what you noticed about yourself and about your group, like what were threads of similarities from your stories? What did you notice in just a word or sentence about listening to one another in those rooms? And I guess you can either raise your hand and Katie will unmute you, or you can unmute yourself and just with a word or phrase, just what did you notice about that time?
For us, it was a place of refuge for each of us, a place where we could go to, get away from it all and just to be at peace.
A place of refuge. Thank you. Others? What do you notice about yourself in the midst of listening to those stories? What do you notice about yourself as you heard those stories?
I just noticed that everybody was, I mean, that I could relate to what everybody else was saying, that we all have a common ground. That nature provides a common ground.
So there's a sense of connection for you.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Other things you noticed about yourself in the listening?
I noticed as I was listening, I was trying to visualize the places that people were sharing about, either from something similar, if I've been to a similar kind of place or seen a picture, just trying to put myself in that moment.
Mm-hmm. Just letting your imagination take you to that place. Right. The others, what was it like to share this story? For some of you, maybe it was a recent story, or you couldn't think of one at all, or it was something from your childhood. What was it like to share that story again today? What did you notice about yourself?
It's just nice to connect with people and recognize that we have a love of God's creation in common.
Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when we do this exercise, and Candace, I've shared this a little bit earlier, but I'm kind of moving into like just doing the workshop, but then also talking about the workshop from the side a little bit, as in case you wanted, or the rest of you wanted to share this with your faith community, or as a leader in a neighborhood or whatever else. So part of this is to kind of share. So my experience in sharing this particular practice will allow people to find connection, to be in common ground, and to it's sometimes brings this memory of why and how we connect with the sacred in nature. And so that's a part of this conversation. So I'm going to share my screen and have some slides, and these slides will be available to you, and we'll spruce them up and send them to you if that's helpful. And then I'll just kind of move through the rest of the time together. Does it seem like you can see? So we are in a sense of on multiple levels, this sense of Sabbath in action, and people of faith and people that are connected to community of conscience have this opportunity to engage their faith lives, their spiritual lives, with social justice and with environmental justice. And I'm telling you a quick story about Judith Glickson, who is a cellist and a therapist. And she became more and more aware of climate change and the threats that climate change were offering, not only herself, but her children and to communities that were particularly vulnerable. And she began to explore what she might do. She created a cello concert along with some Bach tunes, and a wordless event of about an hour long. And the series of concerts were played here in North Carolina, as well in Massachusetts. And she raised money and awareness for climate change. And the concert culminated with a cello piece that she played that was connected to the temperature changes over the past 100 years. The notes of the cello and the data from this chart were connected, and it's a very powerful experience. And so what happened for Judith is that she was devastated by the knowledge of this climate experience, and she was in deep Sabbath and grief as well. In the midst of that, this idea of the one cello, one planet came to fruition. That her sense of listening and rest and self-awareness and what was the need at the time culminated in this sense of passionate action. She could have said, I'm going to study climate science, or she said she could have begun a journalistic way of beginning to write, but instead she used the gifts that she had at that time to engage in climate action. And so that's what we are doing. We're leaning into the wisdom of your own communities, the space, the listening, the contemplation, and the deep listening. And then we're also connecting with a sense of urgency that things need to happen quickly on a variety of fronts, including climate change, with compassionate, intentional action, with the gifts of your own life and the passions and relationships that your community hold. And so that's part of the reason for this workshop. I will say that before the workshop was created, the toolkit, which is, or the guide, Creation Care Guide, is about 57 actions that a community could take, for anything from singing hymns to starting a recycling program to engaging in social justice in your neighborhood. And we would begin to offer those things out, like we did it at a Wild Goose Festival. And I remember a woman who was Presbyterian was describing her experience of recycling at her church, and that she started this recycling program. She'd been doing it for a year and a half. At the fellowship hour, this seems so far away, so far removed, like they were actually together in a building and they would have fellowship hour, and she had the recycling bins with pictures on which kinds of things to put in each basket, and here's the trash, they did announcements from the pulpit, they had it in the newsletter, here's how to recycle, for a year and a half. And she was so angry as she was describing this story to us in this small group at Wild Goose that no one was recycling right. So she began to despise going to worship, because she knew that she would have to be cleaning up after this failed recycling project. And so she was beginning to foster this sense that her church just did not care about the earth, did not care about their faith, did not care about justice. And so I began to understand that when we would share this piece of paper that had 57 different actions on it, that there's a lot of disappointment built into that. There's a lot of things that won't fit a particular congregation. And so we began to see it less as a list of things to do and more as a discernment tool to help her congregation and her and your congregations, because we know that the community gardens are not for every congregation, that there are some faith communities that don't have church buildings or synagogues, and so they may focus on curriculum and on education, and so that's what we're moving into at this time. And so I don't know if you have pen and paper nearby, but if you can run and grab something to just jot, it's not, you don't have to turn anything in, and it's not going to be like a formal writing assignment or anything like that, but it will be helpful for you in the next minutes to be able to write down or jot something down, or you could squeeze your screen over, and if you're tech savvy, you can just type some things in. But this next part of our time together can be done individually, but it also can be done in small groups, and you could do this in a Zoom fashion with your congregation or with a green team or with your neighborhood, whichever group you want. And it's a style kind of a SWOT kind of analysis, which is strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But we are looking at strengths, resources. Here, I'll do this little thing. Oh wait, not annotate. So strengths, resources, kind of location. Where is your neighborhood? What's the watershed that you're in, the congressional district, where are your participants coming from, and then the time, the Kairos moment. And so listening to your community, and this is a practice that will engage to help you pay attention to how the Spirit might be moving in your community at this time. So we're just going to move through each of these four and just spend about a minute or two. And I'm going to invite you to just either think about this section or jot it down or both. And then we'll just take a minute to talk about some of these things. So as you're thinking about your community, maybe you're bringing just your household to this meeting today, or maybe you're bringing your faith community or a school or an office place or something like that. And I recognize that this looks really different today than it maybe did in January. But at the same time, there are communities of people that are held together by some entity. And for some of us, it's faith communities. So I invite you to, how do I move? All right. I'm going to stop sharing and then reshare so I can get to that again. All right. Can you see that now still? Listening to your community? Yes, okay. So in this listening to your community part, if you would just think about what your community is known for, what are your strengths? What are the skills and passions? What are the unique abilities that your community might have? And what are some of the strengths? You're welcome to continue with the strengths. And if you're ready, I invite you to spend a minute or two thinking about the resources within your community or your neighborhood or your household. What kinds of resources do you have available to you? The leadership, the people in place. Do you have buildings or finances or volunteers? Do you have people with particular kinds of skill sets or relationships? That would be a strength, a resource for you. I invite you now to take a minute on a location, and this may feel a little less important than it did, but since we're from all different places for Zoom, the location is our screen, whatever it is. But for many of us, there are still faith communities that have buildings or offices or schools that have a location. And so what is the actual physical location? And we could be thinking about Buncombe County or Western North Carolina, but what are the passions and needs of your neighborhood or your area? What is your watershed? What kinds of plants and animals? What is your congressional district? Where are you located? What are the unique qualities of your location? The fourth way that we're inviting congregations to listen is, what time is it in your community? What does this moment call for in your community? What is happening in your community and the world right now? What is spiritually stirring in your community right now? What does the world need from you and your community today? And this word kairos and chronos are two different Greek words for time. And kairos is this deeper sense of an awareness of the spirituality, or this longer moment that is less than a point in time, but more of a stirring of the spirit, or a movement that is right for a particular action. I invite you to think about that with or listen to your community with that lens. So in a small group setting, or if you were facilitating this, I'm stepping out now into the observer role. Each of these quadrants could take a whole session. Like, you could do a 30-minute session on just your strengths and brainstorming and dreaming about what are your strengths for your community, or 30-minute session just on resources the next Tuesday, or whatever that looks like. So this could be a 6-week process that you engage with your creation care team, or your session or board or directors. Just knowing, and there are other questions that you might ask. Like, I'm not a leadership expert, or pretend to know how to do all these assessments well, but these have been helpful for many congregations that we work with, and it's a great starting point. We believe it would be helpful for you. So we're going to step into breakout rooms again. You'll be with your same group that you were with for the all moment. I believe Katie is still with us. I have to scroll down to see everybody. Here she is. And so I invite you to, in your smaller groups, your breakout room, just to spend a little time. Like, what did you notice? What of this seems important to you? What of this does not seem important right now? And how, what are you hearing as you're listening to your community in this two-dimensional expression of your community? And so we'll just spend, it's maybe just 5 minutes, 5-6 minutes together on that. And I'll stop sharing. I think maybe that'll help. Welcome back. Thank you, Katie, for seamlessly ushering us to different rooms and then getting us all back. It's both a blessing and a curse to be cut off in the middle of a sentence or whatever else you've been talking about. In that
No, it's hard because I can't tell, so I just like,
yeah, no,
hopefully they're wrapping up.
Yeah, we just have about 20 more minutes total, so it's good to keep us tight. What did you notice from your group on that one? What were some of the things you heard? What are, maybe for the good of the group, if you could just share a sentence or two from your small group that doesn't, please.
With the few minutes we had, even though, yeah, we were cut off mid-sentence. Susan, I put my email, Susan, if you want to email me later. We were, Jessica was sharing her strength, well, her resources and where she's operating in the divinity school. I took some notes myself because really what she's doing is a part of something that I try to plan to do as well. I'm finishing a PhD in earth and animal care and theology and ethics. So, and then I was sharing the importance of doing this work is even more, I think, where people are going to listen because of this pandemic we have going on. And for me, being mainly connected with not just African American churches, but African American Pentecostal churches, you know, and I try to tell them about the spirit, just like we read in Judeo-Christian, of course, books, how the spirit is hovering over the earth and the spirit is in humanity, the breath of life in humanity, and the other species is animals. So I try to draw those things. And I think people are more or less wanting to hear now because, for example, well, I mean, case in point, we know that the majority of people dying from this pandemic are African Americans, people with pre-existing conditions. And I live in an area, Raleigh, I'm in the rural part, and then I'm working with a congregation in Goldsboro. So I'm working to get people to understand the importance of caring for creation. And so a lot of what you said and like the exercise at the beginning and connecting people, so having people return back to their memories of nature, because, you know, all that's kind of out the window when you're just trying to work to survive. And so my point is to connect them with connecting themselves to the sacred is also part of their actual identity as Africans. The cosmology of Africanness is interconnecting humanity, nature, and spirit, or spirit again. So I'm really appreciative that I joined in because I'm going to want to use some of this to connect them with Earth Care.
Thank you. Other noticings from your smaller group?
Our group was just 2 people this time, and I've notified Kate of that, but so there wasn't a lot of input, but from my end for sure. But I noticed that her group's strengths were about were more progressive and more, you know, liberal. Many churches tend to be conservative. You know, some of them, I can't speak too, you know, too much to that because I don't know all the different faiths, but I know a lot of conservative. And hers was more, you know, liberal, more progressive. And so what I told her was, and what impressed me the most was for things like people that are transgender, gay, you know, they're more accepted in her church. And I told her that she needed to play on those liberal strengths because I don't feel like there's enough of them, and that those strengths need to be, she needs to focus on those specific strengths because there's not enough of them in the world just yet. So hope I didn't babble too much on that comment, but I was trying to pull my thoughts together.
Thank you. Other noticings from your listening to your community exercise and your small group? All right, I'm going to share my screen again and continue with the slides. So this is, we have, like I said, 57 or so different rectangles or action steps. These are 19 of the subcategories. We're going to show you the full tool in a little while, but we're getting there. This is developed into 6 different areas where we find that congregations can most often engage in creation care. We know that there's a whole lot of other ones, But these are a few of the categories. And again, this is designed to help begin conversations and help congregations to start on this path. And so these 6 categories are sustainability practices, spirituality and worship, education, building and land, community building, fellowship and outreach, and advocacy and economics. And these are different ways that we find that communities can engage in loving their neighbors and loving God and loving creation. And so as we're listening to our community, this is a point where we begin to look at more tangible steps towards what might happen next, and what are kind of the more natural or kind of the more indigenous way that you all as your community might engage in creation care, not something that has been offered to you as a solar panel solution or a garden solution because it might not fit. And so these are just some ideas. And I wonder if, as you're looking through this, if you would jot down 3 of the top 3 that you are interested in. Just write them down, or you can chat them. You can put them in the chat. The top 3 that you personally are interested in, and then in a minute, I'm going to invite you to look at the top 3 that you think your congregation is already doing correctly, or that you think might be a next step for your faith community. And so the blue are the kind of the major categories. And so what we're really looking for are the white words. So pollution, waste reduction, and then everything in white. Just pick 3 of those 19. There are then 19 of those. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing for a moment. Oh wait, has everyone had their 3? I'll give you another 30 seconds in case you're. Oh wait, I'm sharing my screen. That doesn't help. Ah, no. Sorry, team. I'm on a whole nother thing now. All right.
Are you having trouble stopping your screen share?
No, I should
Okay.
just stop it. That was a good solution. So I'm just going to read through them real quickly, and if you would just raise your hand so we can get a sense of which ones you're interested in. So pollution and waste reduction. Food. Transportation. Worship and liturgy. Reconnection. Yeah, there's one. Okay. I was glad you can hear me. Reconnection with nature. Prayer and meditation. Public classes and book studies. 3, okay. Youth and children. Communication, social media, writing. Energy, clean energy, energy efficiency. Water. Conservation, landscape, native plants. Organics and earth-friendly cleaning. Building an earth care sustainability team. Great, thank you. Compassion and justice in your community. loving your neighbor, policy, legislation, and influence that way. 3 on there. Voting, and investments. Great. And Mary's, Susan posted hers in the chat, policy and legislation, public education, and prayer and meditation. Mary said public classes, water, conservation, landscape. And Candace is heading out. And we'll send those to you, Candace, as you're gone now. Great. Good job. So in a gathering like that, I typically go with personal to start with, and then do a similar practice for your community. So thinking about your church, or for Laura, your 2 churches, what would be the top 3 of those 19? And when you get a small group, thinking about the same community and doing that listening practice, you begin to see things percolate to the top. Like some things that I would think, oh, of course, it's going to be education or children. It's actually something really different. And when you have multiple people noticing those things together, there can be a sense of consensus and a prayerful discernment that leads you towards something that is more indigenous to your community than my great idea, if that makes sense. Then I would do the same practice that you just did individually, do it with the thought of your community. And then when I'm doing it in person, I would, ask them I would either read it out loud or ask in a small group for someone to compile it. And then we can find out what are the top 3 or 4 things that you might want to start with. And these are not the end all be all. These are beginning places, trusting that the Spirit and your community will then move out from there, if that makes sense. So I'm going to share my screen again. I believe, let's try the Chrome. And just share with you the guide then. So then from those 19, you can see, how do I do it where you can view, present, okay. So you can see that these major 6 categories, sustainability practices, spirituality, and worship, are along the edge. And then those 19 that you were just picking from are along the right-hand edge of this piece of paper. And it's front and back. We have it where going from left to right, you can see that there's more basic as far as resources and knowledge required, all the way to kind of like PhD level of what we would consider tougher for congregations to decide on. And so there's a movement here. And so as you were thinking about your top 3, you would be able to find your top 3 things in these categories, so food or transportation, and then you can look along those areas and begin to discern what would be a logical first step or a prayerful first step for us. I'm going to see if I can move. I'm going to actually just go to Creation Care Alliance, so then we can just look at this real fast. So in the Creation Care Alliance website, under resources, you can find the guide for creation care. And so this thank you, Melody. She just showed the actual piece there. The guide, it has all of those practices listed out. And so let's say we took food, like none of you did say food, but I'm going to select food because I think it's applicable across homes and congregations right now. And so when you click on food, you'll see the 3 categories moving from left to right: planting seeds, nurturing growth, deepening roots. So these are of those 19. Actually, these are even expanded from there. And then when you click on the Learn More, there's a whole page that has 4 categories within. this page. See, this is nurturing growth, promoting plant-rich or meatless meal regularly. And this is when you were gathering together as a congregation, done for your home as well. And so we have suggested practices and next steps for this particular one. We also have general or national information. For some, we have congregations that are doing this thing, which you might be able to learn from that congregation. So we'll have email addresses and things like that. So there are different resources here. I'll show you that Drawdown is one of the national or kind of general resources that we offer around food, and they have Project Drawdown as a climate and earth-based care for the earth. And so then that's the link from that. So there's like 3 clicks from that work, plant-rich diets. So this is what your creation care team or your discernment team might be able to engage in around this resource. We also have this page here and other resources available on the website as well. So this will show you the entire 57 pieces there. And so the question that you were asking yourselves and that you'll be asking your faith community are what are the next steps for us? And for some of you, you've been doing a lot of this work for quite some time. Your faith community has been doing this for quite some time. For others, you had plans and then COVID-19 thwarted those plans or have adjusted those plans. Others, like there's a congregation in Tryon, the Congregational Church in Tryon. Today, they're visiting St. Eugene's Catholic Church and Grace Covenant. They're visiting solar panels, congregations with solar panels on them, because they are choosing to place solar panels during this time. So they're in the midst of finding contractors and getting bids. And so this is still very much alive for them. And so there may be energy to do some of that work in your faith community. We only have a few minutes left, like 4 or 5 minutes. So I wonder if you have any questions or comments. I will say that when we share the slides, we'll also have examples of creation care for congregations, different congregations that have been doing this, and some photos and things like that that might be helpful for you. Also, in the intersectionality of what we're doing, many of our congregations are engaged in learning about anti-racism and how to be proactive around race. And for you all, that you might explore more specifically how that might intersect with how we care for the body of Earth and how we care for bodies of people of color and others as well. And so these, we'll send this list of resources that Mountain True has been offering, as well as a James Cone article, this ending one here, Whose Earth Is It Anyway?, where he explores anti-racism and ecological care in a really profound way. So questions or comments? And you can chat or speak with your voice. I will share a quote then, as not really a prayer, but more of a invitation to us around particularly climate change. And this has been one that's been helpful for me. This is from Gus Speth, who is a climate scientist. He says, I used to think that the top environmental problems were biodiversity loss, ecosystem collapse, and climate change. I thought that 30 years of good science could address these problems, but I was wrong. The top environmental problems are selfishness, greed, and apathy. And to deal with these, we need a cultural and spiritual transformation. And we scientists don't know how to do that. Faith communities have the unique role in society to be able to speak to the spiritual and moral, the conscious, as well as to address buildings and gardens and the tangible things. We have the opportunity to engage on climate, like the Sierra Club, to engage around anti-racism, like so many other organizations. But beneath the symptoms of the brokenness that we see, we are able and invited to address the root causes of these things, like greed and apathy and corruption and loneliness and isolationism. And people of faith and communities of faith have a greater responsibility and a greater opportunity to engage in being loving. And that's what I believe is your invitation. That it's what you're already doing in your faith communities. It's what you're good at when we're at our best in faith communities. And it's one of the unique roles that we have as we engage in these multiple threats to how we can be the beloved community here on earth. So I'm grateful for you all to take a lunch hour and a half with us, and for Katie to help this go smoothly and to help guide our way. And we will be sharing resources with you. And if there are particular things that you'd like to hear or see in an email, let us know.
Thanks, Scott, for doing this. Appreciate your time as well.
Definitely, and we can support you all doing this for another community. So if you want some variation of this, we can help make that happen. So either, besides giving you the resources, like I'm happy to jump on a call with your team or whatever that looks like as well. Laura and I have been talking a little bit about, not this particular thing, but just like how we might help the high country area. And if you want to unmute yourself, we can just say benedictions to each other by just sharing good words as we depart.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everyone.
Grace and peace all.
Thank you very much.